In today's episode, I am speaking with Raja Javaid. He is the Chief Information and Transformation Officer at University of Warwick. What a brilliant conversation where we hear Raja's journey, where he started from, early family life, how his mum influenced his values and how he's navigated his career. And just so interesting to hear the breadth of his experience, the different industries he worked in, how he proactively took opportunities, and the key messages that he would share with us about leading at the very top when you are underrepresented, and how his values have held true to him throughout his career. There are so many gems and takeaways that I think you can gain from just taking a listen to this wonderful story and journey. Raja, good morning.
Morning.
It is fantastic to have you here. We've just been having a little chat before we press record, but welcome to Bravery in the Boardroom. It will be great for our audience to know your current role and what you do.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for the invite and for considering me for today's podcast. I'm Raja Javaid. I'm the Chief Information and Transformation Officer at the University of Warwick. I've been there just over 3 years. And I not only lead the digital function of Warwick, but I've also been leading the transformation agenda over the last 3 years. Not only that, I sit on the University Executive Board, so I equally get involved on a number of strategic aspects of the university.
Okay, and tell us a little bit more about University of Warwick. It would be good to just know a little bit about it. I know it's got quite a reputation as a university.
Yeah, University of Warwick, it's one of the leading research-led universities. We have circa 35 to 37,000 students, wow, both physically on campus, but also across our various virtual learning channels. But in addition to that, we have a thriving community, both of students and staff, that absolutely over the last 60 years, we celebrate our 60 years this year, has seen a level of growth and credibility, not only in the UK, but worldwide.
So I know I want to talk about you and hear a little bit more about that journey to this executive role that you hold now. But always ask, my first question I sort of ask after that is, how would you describe your leadership style in just 3 words?
Yeah, a tough question. So the 3 words I'd choose would be empathetic, decisiveness, and transformation. Empathetic because I think everything I've learned over the 30 years of my career is, doesn't matter how great your processes are, doesn't matter how great your digital infrastructure is, all about the people and the culture that wraps around it. Decisiveness, because I think you have to take a decision point, and indecisiveness costs money, whether that's private or public sector. And transformation, because I'm always a believer that change is the norm, and we need to accept that both in our personal and professional lives.
Okay. So you mentioned 30 years there, right? So it'd be great to hear a little bit more about, and you mentioned private sector.
Yep.
What was your career journey like before you got to Warwick?
So I have worked for 30 years. So it's probably helpful if I take a quieter step back. So my mother came into the country in 1969. I'm the youngest of 4 children. And my father left 4 months before I was born. Okay. So I was brought up in a very financially difficult environment, but also in an environment where my role model, my mother, was all about resilience, was all about hard work. And had to face the challenges, being of South Asian origin, of the optic of being a single parent, but also at a time in the 70s and 80s where being somebody of an ethnic minority was challenged, I should say, by the general norm of some of the more extreme views. So as I grew up, although I was academically strong, I realized that actually I need to start working at a younger age to support and provide that level of financial stability and support to the family. So that started off with jobs like a checkout operator at Asda. I then had an opportunity to join Dixon Stores Group. I was a call advisor, providing telephony support for customers that had purchased from PC World, Currys, Dixons.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I very much do. under the banner of masterclass, if you mean that.
Okay.
But then I had this opportunity to move into learning and development as a secondment.
Yeah.
That then translated into becoming part of the team, which eventually led me to lead the training function. And my career opportunities just came through so many opportunities that were either bestowed upon me or I just happened to sense an opportunity. So I did that for about 10 years. I then moved into Boots in Nottingham, the head office. I led the recruitment service. I led a transformation. I then moved to Rolls-Royce for 7.5, 8 years, International Airlines Group in around the M25. And then lastly to University of Warwick. So I've had quite a varied career, both B2C, B2B, and then now into HE. So it's been pretty interesting.
You just with what you mentioned there about your start in life,
Yes.
and kind of what I heard there is almost the kind of work ethic
Yeah.
that it gave you, and you spoke about your mum and resilience. What helped you? So you said it very briefly, but there's some big career jumps in there and some real promotions. What helped you along the way?
Yeah, so one of the learnings I've taken as an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, it operates on certain presuppositions. And there was one that really stood out for me. If one person could do something, anybody can. And that sounds really cliche when you read it or see it, but actually into practice, there is nothing stopping you or I or anybody else, anybody watching or listening, to do anything that anybody else is doing today. The difference might be it might take you that bit longer.
Yes.
It may be that you have to navigate a different path to the other person. But that focus and that belief, I think, has carried me forward. In addition to that, it has to be the teachings of my mother, which is to operate as best as you can, to work hard,
Yes.
to work with integrity, to be respectful of people. And these are values that I'm sure all children hear from their parents, but they really resonated with me. And they're ones that I've carried, even if I failed, and I have failed innumerable times over those 30 years in a career context. But to be able to dust yourself down and say, no, I'm going to keep going forward, it's definitely a teaching that I've carried and I hold now.
The point you made there about many people may have heard them, but just from the little bit you've shared, and obviously we had an initial conversation before, it sounds like you saw your mum live in those values though. So you know, she wasn't only saying that to you, she actually was leading by example in what you saw there. So flip the script, because you just said there, oh, I failed many times. What were some of the real challenges that you experienced on your journey?
There were several challenges, whether there were some preconceived notions on my ability to be able to progress. E.g., I didn't go to university, as an example, and I recall vividly a particular individual that was interviewing me, and I won't mention them, who said to me that I won't go particularly far because I didn't have a degree. I can cite several examples where whether it was from an academic perspective, whether it was from an ethnicity perspective, whether it's been from the way I communicated, because my speaking patterns when I was younger was a bit more slang and a bit more relaxed. There was immediate snap judgments made, and they can hit you quite hard and quite quickly make you question your own self and your own ability. But my mother's been that beacon for me of resilience, and I look at what she has done and what she continues to do, and it gives me belief that if she can do it, I am born from her. So surely I've got some of those good genes of resilience to be able to see those challenges through.
Can I pick up on what you said there? There's a bit of irony there, isn't it? That you didn't have a degree. You don't have a degree, but then here you are, executive director in one of the most well-known universities in the country. But what would you say? So if I may ask the question there, so how did you navigate that? So I'm almost thinking of two questions on the same track, but what would you say to someone who feels that, we hear about imposterism, and people feeling like, well, I could never apply for a job like that if I haven't got a master's, let alone an undergraduate degree. How did you get around that?
Do you know, I've never really paused to think consciously about it. So it's a really, really good question. But if I was to apply some logic on the path I've taken, I would say number one is don't lose the hunger of curiosity. Although I don't have the physical diploma to show that I haven't graduated from a university in this country, that doesn't necessarily mean I don't have the aptitude and the ability to do something.
Absolutely.
And the curiosity has always fueled the way I approach things. Even as a child, you know, I would dismantle things and wonder how it worked. Or, you know, when computers became mainstream, I would be playing around, tinkering around with it and stuff. So that curiosity has always fueled me to build the experiences that I've got. The second thing I would say is those setbacks. Invariably, you will always get a setback in your personal, professional life. I believe it's how you then deal with them. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that I've always had this calm nature about it. You know, I've had days where it's been pretty challenging or depressing in some cases. Yeah, absolutely. But you need to pull onto your network around you, people that have support you, mentor you, coach you, believe in you, that helps give you the resilience. The third thing that I've done is learned from other people, is have that humility. I don't sit here at all with the attitude that I'm part of an executive board of a world-class university. Not at all. I'm as human as the person doing the most junior role, if I may use that.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not the role that I occupy; it's the responsibility that I hold in that role. And I learn from everybody. You know, every interaction, this one included. I'll take something away from this interaction, and I will go, how does that apply to me in my life, or how can I impart that to other people?
Really profound what you said there. You said it very simply, but that actually as a leader, and particularly as a senior leader, it's the responsibility. Yeah, it's not the title.
Correct.
It's not the position, but it's really kind of being aware of that responsibility you hold. And I suppose what I've heard from you, I can hear and see you're a real change agent, because it's thinking, then what can I do with that? So building on that, what would you say has been your biggest career success today?
There's been several, but I believe the work, one I'd pick is recent. The work we're doing at the University of Warwick around digital, the transformational elements of digital, e.g. AI, which is the big thing everyone's talking about. I was in Vietnam a few weeks ago talking about AI and the potential implications to higher education. But some of the work that the Information and Digital Group, which is the group that I lead, the function, some of the work that we're doing there is just phenomenal. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have circa 500 people within that function that are working tirelessly to improve the digital provision to our students, whether that's the systems that they use, the information they access in the library, whether it's the access that they need to various learning material, and just keeping the lights running, right? And how we do that in an innovative way. I think that's pretty phenomenal. And then on top of that, we have, a digital strategy that's, I think, pretty much best in class, that's going to take the university and progress it even further, and to build a strong foundation for the next 60 years.
So that whole, listening to you there, it's really the whole spectrum
For sure.
of digital, every kind of facet that your team and you have been looking at. So how did you make the transition into higher education? Because that's what I'm most intrigued by, listening to where you said you've worked before. How did this come about?
Yeah, look, in the same way, when I spent 15 years in retail, I then went to manufacturing engineering for 7.5, 8 years. I then went to aviation with IAG, and then into HE. Well, everyone's always asked me that question: how have you bounced through these different sectors? And at the end of the day, and it may be the way my brain operates, it tends to be pretty simple, or I try and translate things simply. You have a product. You need to sell that product in whatever way you sell it, and you need to service and support the consumer that buys that product.
Yes.
If I look at retail, well, that's by all accounts quite obvious. You buy a product from a PT World or from a Boots. You're a customer, you consume it, and then you need support on it. But you go and buy an engine from Civil Aerospace at Rolls-Royce. You're buying an engine as an airline. You're using that engine, you're service and support it. You look at HE. A student is buying an education, and it needs support while it's leveraging that experience, and then it it continues from there. So for me, there's been one thread that's been very consistent. The nuances in my mind are the cultural differences that each of those businesses had. I love that, right? Because again, goes back to my earlier point that you're learning, you're learning a different set of dynamics. You're learning a different cultural norm. And, as I said, the day, I often say, the day you stop learning is the day your career, pretty much in my experience, comes to an end. You never know everything. So I go in with curiosity. I go in with my ears open, but I know there's a common thread that leads that I carry forward.
And could you see that before? So like you said, you're 30 years in now,
Yep.
But could you see that before? Because the ability to be able to, like you said, boil it down and say, actually, what's needed is the same.
Yep.
These are the differing factors, but almost how to drive change when you boil that down. Could you see that before? Has that come in later years?
Yeah, I would say it definitely has come more consciously as I've matured both professionally and personally. I think when I was younger, I'll be really candid, I was chasing the grades, I was chasing the job title, I was chasing the money. And I think that created, for me at least, a bit of a perception that I probably hindered on a bit arrogant in the way I would operate or the way I'd come across. Actually, I realize it's not about the job title. It's not about the position one holds. It's not about the salary. It's about the experiences and the people that you work with, for me at least. So I think it's given me that opportunity to reflect differently to probably when I was in my early 20s, mid-20s or 30s, I think.
I appreciate your honesty there, actually, because it's not easy.
Oh, yeah.
It's not easy to admit that, but I think it's so useful for, like I was saying to you, some of our listeners are earlier in their career journey, and I think that's really useful advice to maybe think about what's driving you. It's not wrong to be driven by money. No. It's not wrong to want to progress, but it's not necessarily what's going to help you.
Correct.
I think when it is time to think about next steps, or when you're thinking about why am I really here and what's my purpose, or what value am I actually bringing? I think that point really resonated with me, actually. So what I also want to ask, you mentioned earlier in our conversation about, growing up in the 70s and 80s from a South Asian background. Your dad left the family quite early. Talk to me a little bit more about so I don't want to make an assumption, but if your heritage has played a part or had an impact on your career, particularly if you've come into more senior roles?
Yeah, I think inevitably underrepresented groups have challenges. Malik, and I think for me, I could probably spend the rest of this podcast talking about some of the unfortunate experiences I've had. I have faced prejudice behavior through my early parts of the career. I've had comments made about the race that I come from, the origin, the religion, said in jest, but unfortunately it has quite a personal impact. I've had people confusing me with another South Asian person, which really hurts. And I don't believe in all of those cases that they were done deliberately with malice. I think to a certain degree there's an unconscious bias that we all have, irrespective of our gender, our ethnicity. But I do think that it can be quite hurtful. It can affect the confidence levels. It's definitely affected 100%. Me, where I felt I have to overplay or work harder because of the background that I come from. And the degree is another one. Many leaders that I've worked with who would agree or would actually come forward and say that I would say to them, I feel I have to work harder than the other person in my peer because I don't hold a university degree.
Yeah.
You know what? Looking back now, I think all of that's in my own head. It's the demons that we carry. I do think it's incumbent on leaders that are working with unrepresented groups to be more compassionate, to have a bit more understanding, to listen more than to transmit, me included. And equally recognize that we will have a level of unconscious bias. It's okay to have them, because I think that's how the humankind grows, but recognize the impact of those.
100%.
And I think that's come with maturity for me, but there were many, many times, particularly 30s and early 40s, where I felt, like as though there was a bit of a chip on my shoulder, but equally that I was challenged, probably more so because of things like my ethnicity or religion or so on.
How did you overcome it? Or have you overcome it? I must have listened here, right?
So when I was younger, look, it manifested itself reactionary as sometimes frustration, if I'm honest, sometimes anger, sometimes immediate snap judgments of people. But as I've gotten older, I think I've found that, like me, I will have certain viewpoints on certain topics.
Yes.
Some people will have certain viewpoints around certain topics. I think it's okay to disagree, but do it respectfully. And I think we live in a world now where there's so, as we were saying earlier, so extreme polarized views, sadly, that I think it's incumbent on leaders that operate in senior positions to start to bridge that gap. I think we're in a place where there's enough talk, more action needed.
For sure. I mean, I asked you these questions because we don't ignore the elephant in the room here. It's not a play on words when we say bravery in the boardroom. And the reason why, I co-founded it was about seeing boardrooms more representative of the communities and people they serve. And exactly what we're talking about, representation by our differences, but also by diversity of thought, experience. So I loved the story about how you transitioned into higher education, because what you must have brought in your experience is thought process, curiosity. I'm sure it's shaking it up. It's shaking it up.
I do try.
But I think what you unpacked there's something I always speak about. We must acknowledge impact.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I always challenge is about what the intent was. Totally hear it if it wasn't intentional, but we must acknowledge impact, right? And as leaders, it's really important that you acknowledge that personal impact, if it's come from you or if it's something that's happening in your teams, that you've got people want to feel heard, people want to feel safe. And yes, we do carry our own baggage. We all carry our own baggage, right? And there's baggage, especially, I think, about social mobility.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that background where we've come from. But actually, we can do our own work to look at mindset, look at what can help us. But if we're constantly seeing factors in our environments that are fueling those thoughts, that's why we talk about in Bravery in the Boardroom, we work with both sides of the coin. Colleagues who are underrepresented, not because diversity is lesser, it's because of exactly what you described, isn't it? How do I navigate this? I've got the capability, I've got the talent, but the environments I'm going into are not diverse, or they're not yet inclusive. And then how do we work with colleagues who are the senior decision makers, which you wear both hats, right?
Yeah, totally.
How do we work with you to create more inclusive cultures? As you said, to be aware, to be able to support and understand the difference between, it's not upskilling, it's about how people navigate the spaces. So thank you so much for kind of helping to unpack that. I wanted to just come back to the point about higher education and representation at senior level. You've gone in.
I have.
Okay, so, and I know one of few in terms of looking visibly different. What more do you think should or could be done to increase representation at senior level in higher education?
Yeah, I think my observation, I'll start off with the University of Warwick. I work with a diverse set of colleagues on the executive board, and there's a lot of mutual respect that we bring, and I don't just mean diversity in terms of ethnicity, but also our experiences, which you've alluded to. So there are colleagues that a profession has been in academia, and you've got me coming from the private sector, so that in itself is
different,
a diverse dynamic. And in our council group, which is our non-exec group, we have a diverse set of colleagues there from every facet of that word. I think more broadly, across the UK, I think we're seeing a change. And the reason we're seeing a change is that the sector needs to think about how it transforms itself and start to become more, get the balance between the richness of academia and operating as a commercial business.
Yes.
And that comes through that fusion of those two skill sets coming together. So we're seeing a lot more of that. But one thing I would say, I was at a conference about 3 years ago, and there was a particular question asked, and I can't remember the specifics, and I won't cite which university colleagues were sat on the panel to the side of me. But there was a particular question about the challenge the sector has. This was about 3 years ago. And each of the respective panelists gave their responses. There were 4, and it came to me, and I looked, and I noticed that I was another male against another 4 males as a digital leader. And that actually really upset me, and I had to say, it's ironic that we're talking about diversity.
Yeah.
I'm sat on here, a panel with 4 other males even, sorry. And I think that's probably its biggest challenge, which is how do we start to create richness of diversity from a gender perspective? Again, we have some brilliant VCs that are female across the country. We have, our CFO's female, our registrar's female at Warwick. So there's a good branching of diversity. But I do think there's more that can be done as we go into the next levels of the institution to really create that richness, but recognize the beauty it brings as well.
Yes.
Right? Because it does bring a lot of richness to the table.
And I suppose your point there, we don't talk about that enough, do we? I think, as a collective, kind of about the benefits of having diversity across the piece. And I think what I heard you say in there is about maybe thinking about the succession planning and pipeline.
Yep.
So you are seeing diversity starting to come through, but I know you kind of parachuted in.
Yeah.
So maybe it's coming in, but maybe thinking about how do you grow your own and retain that talent. Okay.
I think it's incumbent, coming from a minority group, that I look to address the challenges that I would often observe from afar. So I would absolutely encourage any of the listeners that fall into those minority groups, and it could be gender, it could be ethnicity, sexual orientation, whatever it may be, that you champion and push and drive for that level of diversity. My deputy is female. I make sure that I aspire to balance that split. And I think we need to move the conversation away from a metric into purposeful interventions. I've been really fortunate when I joined Warwick that within my function, there was an initiative called Women in IDG. It was a fantastic initiative that was set up. I can't take any credit. It was launched by my predecessor as a trial. And it was presented to me that we've done our trial. This is what it's about. It's various topics. It talks about women in tech. It talks about things like menopause and men understanding that as well, what it means to lead a team. If you've got a colleague that's going through menopause, what does that mean? It was phenomenal. But absolutely, I want to see that further rolled out, right? And it is about that imposter syndrome. It is about the confidence. It is about that resilience. It is about the life that's led outside of work.
Yes.
And recognizing the impact it has or how we can create a better environment. There's they're the kind of purposeful initiatives I think that need to be done. That I don't see as much of. I often see it as a bit of a metric, what percentage is male and female.
Yes.
I don't think that's the answer. I think it's how do you go in with some targeted interventions to create that. But to your point, recognize the value and the benefit it creates to whatever it is, the business or to the team.
Because you are, like I mentioned, because you're a change agent, it's that what I hear from you here is the blend of your experience, with also your expertise. So what you're saying is, great to have a metric to focus the attention, but actually, what's the intervention or initiative that's going to help to drive the change, that's going to keep that focus, maybe I think is what I'm hearing you say there. So if you were given a kind of key bit of advice, if I said it that way, a key bit of advice to who you just mentioned, our underrepresented, aspiring senior leaders who want to get to, board level, exec level in higher education, is there any particular advice you'd give them?
Yeah, loads. Let me pick a few. I think the first one is create kind of a peer-to-peer networking groups are so important. And not only to talk about the elephant in the room, so to speak, but also to share some experiences and to learn from those as well. So I think the first is that fuel the curiosity in you, join these kind of peer-to-peer networks, the kind of environments that you're creating and show others, and share your story and learn from other people's stories would be the first one. The second one is have humility. And I think that's important. As I've said earlier, I had little moments where I think I tipped the balance away from humility into arrogance. It didn't serve me well. Have humility, keep listening, keep learning from your team, because it will again open and enrich you. I don't ever think that you've landed, right? Because I think the day you land or you think you've landed, your journey's over, right?
Yeah.
And the third one for me would be to accept that you will get things wrong. And rather than having a win and lose mindset, have a win and learn mindset. You either win and you've achieved, or if you do get the setback, learn from it.
Yeah.
Take that learning
Yeah.
and apply that the next time you give it a go again. And I think that is innovation at its core, but we are all about innovation as people, right? So that'll be my recommendation.
Just some real sound advice there. And thank you for that last point about, because win and learn is we hear that struggle, but actually you've just unpacked it a little bit more for us, because that is what can get people caught in the imposterism trap, isn't it? The fear of failure.
Correct.
Or the nightmare of the failure. So it's happened and it's just kind of echoing and staying with me. So thank you so much for that. I think if anyone's listening, that was gems. That was gems there. So for our listeners, if they want to connect with you or find out more, what's the best way of doing that?
LinkedIn would probably, I wouldn't say I was pretty active on LinkedIn. I do, share thoughts and ideas, some of my experiences. I'm a pretty open book. It goes back to, I think, one thing that we was talking about, which is I think it's incumbent on me and many others that now operate in senior positions of unrepresented groups to give back. So if there's anything that I can do to anybody, whether they're represented or unrepresented in nature, I'm accessible on LinkedIn. I'm contactable. I will do my best to offer advice and support, and hopefully 1 or 2% of whatever I share might be useful to them on their journey. But yeah, that'd be the best way to contact me.
Thank you. I think what you've shared in this conversation today, one of the things that drove me to start the podcast was to, number one, be able to access senior leaders and colleagues like yourself, who I know that for our audience can't always reach, and to almost unpack which sometimes the questions people want to ask in a mentoring conversation, right? But don't know how to ask it or haven't built that rapport yet. So I know what you shared today is, I think, part inspirational, because I think where you started, what you've experienced in your career, but also really advisory in guiding people and not just giving out the advice, but explaining why. I've also heard about, what higher education can think about actually to increase diversity at senior level, and not just maybe thinking about how to go about that. So it's been an absolutely brilliant conversation. Last question I ask all my guests, because I think well-being's important. I don't think we should hide that sometimes senior roles can be quite stressful. So what do you do to look after your health and well-being?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. It can be very lonely because the book often stops with you. What do I do? I've learnt due to personal circumstances to kind of achieve a balance. I would typically take everything to heart, and in my very simplistic mind, more hours meant more productivity. It does.
Me too.
It
Yeah, that
absolutely does. Right.
Resonate.
And it actually results in ill health over time, or it can result in implications on your personal life. What I do aspire to do now is just find a moment to breathe. That sounds really cheesy, but
No, not in the current climate. No.
so whether it's the drive home, whether it's waking up in the morning and being grateful that I've actually woke up in the morning, which sounds very deeply spiritual, but whether it's that mindfulness of stop and just observe the stuff around you. That could be your family, that could be your loved ones, So it's finding those moments, and that 5 or 10 minutes of mindfulness helps me recalibrate. It helps me just get some focus and some perspective, but also it makes me recognize what really is important. And that I aspire to do that. I'm not perfect at it yet, but I do. That's where I tend to get my moments of anchoring to reality, as I would call it.
Oh, I like that term. You'll notice I like little strapline.
Sure.
But anchoring in reality, I think, thank you, because the reality is when you are a busy exec,
Yeah.
you may not have, yes, there are some people who can really bake, an hour and a half into their day, but actually hearing what you said there, being able to take a moment when you get a moment,
Yeah.
I think is what I'm hearing there, and reminding yourself, as you said, the inner chatter can sometimes go wild.
Correct.
Right? So bringing yourself back and anchoring down, I think that's a note to self for me as well, right? Raja, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I hope actually we speak again soon.
And thank you very much for having me here. And I just want to echo, you talked about interventions that we need to play. I think the work that you're doing is exactly the kind of interventions that we do, which is surface those conversations up. Because I hope maybe from this or subsequent conversations that you do, the listeners will take something away.
100%.
I didn't have those in my career. And in hindsight, retro 2020 vision, looking back, I wish I did. So I think the work that you're doing is absolutely fantastic, and I think it does help the future generation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us
Thank you.
today.
Thanks very much.